wait is finally over. March Madness is here, 2 years in the making. I got my March Madness flow going. I got some bets locked in, and I'm ready to get into them. I got some trends, I got some tips, I got some value picks, so let's not waste any time. We're gonna start off right off the top with the odds to win this year's edition of March Madness. Gonzaga, the Bulldogs, the betting favorite at plus 200, and then you got the other three number one seeds coming up right behind them, Baylor, Michigan, and Illinois. Then you're looking at the number two seeds in Houston, Iowa, Alabama, and Ohio State, and then West Virginia and Florida State are sneaking in the top 10 of the March Madness odds as well. Now, if you're gonna bet on a team to win the entire tournament, you gotta take a look at how those seeds have done in years past. So let's look at that next. 63% of March Madness winners have been number one seed, so you probably want to focus on one of those four teams, Gonzaga, Illinois, Michigan, or Baylor. And if not them, I would bet on a 2 seed or a 3 seed, and then I would stop after that because pretty rare for a seed lower than that to win. Also interesting, a 5 seed has actually never won the March Madness tournament, and I don't think that's going to happen for the first time this year either. But let's get into some trends heading into the March Madness tournament. The top teams against the spread so far this season, the Drake Bulldogs, coming in the number one spot. They've covered the spread at a rate of 77.78% this season. Of course, they have a first round matchup, a first four matchup against Wichita State in order to play into the actual tournament. And then you got UConn is in there, Grand Canyon, Drexel, interesting as a 16 seed, playing against Illinois in the first round. Now, of course, don't bet on them to win outright, but if you're looking for a 16 seed to cover the spread, well, Drexel has done it at a 75% rate so far this season, so that they might be worth a look. Now we looked at the best teams against the spread. Now let's look at the worst teams against the spread heading into the tournament. Michigan State, 9-18. They only cover the spread in 33.33% of their games this season, and they have a first four matchup as well against UCLA, who's also in the bottom five. Now, the other thing that's interesting to note, you'll see Maryland here is in the bottom five. Well, they have their first matchup in the tournament is actually against UConn, who we saw was in the top five teams in covering the spread. So that matchup is interesting. You got a team who hasn't covered the spread going up against a team that's covered the spread quite a bit this season. So keep an eye out for that. Now let's look at the best over teams heading into the tournament. The teams that have been scoring the most points and hitting those over bets. Oral Roberts, the best over team in the March Madness tournament, hitting the over at a rate of 69.57%. Interesting thing to note here is we could potentially see an Elite Eight matchup between West Virginia and Oklahoma State. Now, they are a 3 seed and a 4 seed, so it's probably unlikely. But if it does happen, expect a lot of points in that potential matchup. And then we looked at the over teams. Now, of course, we're going to look at the under teams. What teams are playing good defensive basketball? St. Bonaventure has been hitting the under at a rate of 73.68% this season. And then you got Grand Canyon, Morehead State, VCU, and Mount St. Mary's. Really, the only interesting thing to note here is that we could see a second round matchup between VCU and Grand Canyon, but they would both have to pull off pretty big first round matchup, especially Grand Canyon would have to beat number 2 seed Iowa. So probably not likely, but if it does happen, expect a low scoring game. So there you go for trends. Let's get into my picks. I'm going to start off with a couple of value picks. The first one I'm looking at is Florida State to win the East region at 6-1. I love that value on this pick. I think the East region does have the weakest number 1 seed heading into the tournament. It's Michigan. Michigan stumbled down the stretch, 2-3 in their last 5 games. They have Isaiah Livers probably out of their lineup, probably won't be returning. So if there's a region that has a weak number 1 seed, I think it's the East. And it's just good stylistic matchups for Florida State, especially in the second round against Colorado and then in the Sweet 16 against Michigan. I think Florida State's size matches up with those two teams. And also, Florida State just doesn't really have any glaring holes in their team. They're very good offensively. They're solid defensively. They can rebound the basketball. So I think we're getting a lot of value here on Florida State to be in the Final Four as a 4 seed at 6-1. So a little bit of value pick there. And speaking of value, my next pick is what I call my Cinderella pick, my Cinderella bet. We know in March Madness every year there's a low seed team that's going to go on a run, that's going to make headlines, and I like to bet on who that team is going to be. And my prediction to be the 2021 edition of the Cinderella story is the Utah State Aggies. I have them to win the South region at 18-1. Now, this bet's probably not going to hit. It's more of a fun bet more than anything, but I just talked about how Michigan, I think, is the weakest number 1 seed. I think the weakest overall region is the South region. You got a banged up Villanova team. You got an Ohio State seeded number 2 who hasn't played good defense all season. You got Baylor, the number 1 seed, who kind of stumbled down the stretch. An overrated Florida team. So I think if there's a region where a dark horse team can make a run, it is the South region. And Utah State plays very good fundamental basketball. They rebound fantastically, 3rd in the country in rebounding percentage, 7th in the country in defensive efficiency, so they play very good defense as well. Now, they have had issues shooting the ball. They're around 180th in effective field goal percentage in the country, but if their offense gets hot, you never know. And then finally, my last point for this one, you got to respect the Mountain West. In my opinion, the most disrespected conference in the country. They made it to the Mountain West Conference Tournament Final against San Diego State. Unfortunately, they fell short, but they had a very good season in what I think is an extremely competitive conference. So Utah State is my pick to be the Cinderella team. I have them to win the South Regional, a little sprinkle at 18-1. And then finally, we're going to finish off with my pick to win the entire 2021 edition of March Madness. My pick to win it all, the Gonzaga Bulldogs. I'm taking the chalk. I'm taking the favorite. Yes, I know they're the 2-1 favorite, but I think this is their year. Starting off, they have a pretty easy path to the Final Four, and odds makers agree. They're minus 250 to make the Final Four. The 2 seed and the 3 seed in the region, Iowa and Kansas, they've already beat both those teams already this season. And speaking about their opponents, I'm sick of this narrative that Gonzaga hasn't played anyone. Have you looked at their out-of-conference schedule? They beat Iowa. They beat Kansas, as I mentioned. They beat West Virginia. They beat the defending champion Virginia Cavaliers by 23 points. This Gonzaga team can win it all. They face competition. They've faced adversity, and they're undefeated heading into the tournament. And then finally, on top of all that, they're the best shooting team in the country. They lead the country in field goal percentage at 55.1%. If you look at effective field goal percentage, they also lead the country at 61%. So great shooting team. They have no holes. They've crushed everyone they've played. I know that they've choked in the past. I don't think they will this year. They are my pick to win it all. Gonzaga Bulldogs. I think they finally get it done at 2-1. So there you guys have it. I got a couple picks, a couple value picks, a couple tips, a couple trends. What else do you want from me? I hope you guys enjoy the 2021 edition of March Madness, and best of luck with all of your bets.